Hi and welcome to this SOLIDWORKS Visualize tutorial for a Turtle Projector animation. In this tutorial I'll take you through the process of creating this animation, from adding lights, animating light colours and environments, and animating parts within the model to create the moving projector. I designed and modelled the whole projector in the 3D Experiences platform's X-Shape app, which you can find within the 3D Sculptor role. I then exported my model as a step file to open in SOLIDWORKS and apply my appearances, and then export again into Visualize. With my model in Visualize, I'll start by showing you my layout. I have my camera viewport here and my camera aspect ratio on 16:9. This is what I typically use for my renderings and tutorial videos. If I zoom out, you can see I've positioned my design within a child's room layout I created for a previous tutorial. But with this one I added a ceiling part so that the light would project onto it, but also to create a more accurate lighting to the scene. I also duplicated the shelf to sit the projector onto. My Visualize project is quite detailed, so the render passes may take a little longer to process during this tutorial. Under my Models tab you can see all my listed parts, including this plane that I inserted using the Add New Model option here to create the ceiling. I have all of my appearances and also decals applied. I can't recommend enough using decals. They add those finishing touches that really elevate your renderings. Moving on to my Scenes tab, I have the generic 3-point faded environment selected, with the brightness on 3 to begin with, and my environment rotated to where I like the look of the light coming into the room. At the start of my animation, I want the room to look fully lit, so I'm increasing the brightness to 5. Under the render window, you can see the number of passes for the render by default is set at 100. But for a more detailed rendering, I may set this at 200, which you can just type into this box. This may slow down your render preview window, but it's a nice way of pre-testing your rendering's final outcome. I'm going to put mine back at 100 so that it doesn't take too long to update. The next job is to add a light into my projector. So under Models, I'm going to first select the Turtle Projector model and drop down its components list. Here I can hide the top of my projector to reveal the LED light inside. At this point my light only has an LED appearance added, but this won't create a strong enough emission to project through the turtle's shell. To add a light source, I'm going back to my Scenes tab and right clicking into the Light section. New Light, Pick Position. You'll see my arrow turns into a plus icon for me to pinpoint where I want to drop the light. I'm positioning the light onto the LED here. My light comes into view as a rectangular area light. I needed to change this to a point light. This lights up from all directions in a spherical form. I can tweak a lot of the settings for this light, starting with the brightness on 2.5. and the sphere radius on 0.001, making it as small as possible to sit within my LED light, which you can see here. I need to move the light to the centre of the LED, so viewing from the top of the turtle and using the transform options, I can drag the light to the centre of the part and then raise it up to the top of my LED until it lights through like this. To see the full effect, I can bring the turtle shell component back into view like this, and you can instantly see the effect it's created. I now have a projector. The light is powerful enough to project up and onto the ceiling too, which is just what I wanted for my rendering. Moving on to the animation, I start with an animation length of around 20 to 21 seconds. This would be a typical teaser video for my tutorials. The first element I want to work with is the turtle shell. This part needs to spin around. To add this to my animation, starting at 0 seconds, I'm going to add a keyframe onto my turtle shell part. Then at 6 seconds, I'm adding a second keyframe. These are in place so that I can hold the shell still for the first 6 seconds. You can control movement between keyframes using the keyframe properties here. For this keyframe, I can drop down the transition in menu and choose hold, and repeat for the first keyframe on the transition out. I like to control the movement of my parts from the very beginning of an animation, even if they're going to remain still. The next keyframe I'm placing is at 10 seconds. I don't have to be too precise with this, as I can always change it later on. At 10 seconds, ensuring I have my part selected, you can see the part has a keyframe from this little red dot here. I'm going to rotate the part 90 degrees on its y-axis. So between 6 and 10 seconds, the projector will turn 90 degrees using the transform options. I can see the movement in my render window. At 14 seconds, I'm rotating again by 90 degrees. Another 90 degrees at the 18 seconds mark. Then at 20 seconds, I'm rotating a final 90 degrees to bring it back to its starting position. Now I want to move these around so that the last rotation takes longer. So during my animation, it slows towards the end to a standstill, rather than an abrupt stop. Again, I don't need to be super precise with this. I can just go by eye and look at the time gaps being around 3 seconds each, and the last running for 4.5 seconds. I can see the movements as I drag the time bar along and the light projections change. Going back to the start of the animation, it's time to animate the light. Adding a keyframe quickly using K on my keyboard, the red icon should appear to show it is part of the animation. Under General, I'm going to start by turning the brightness down to 0, so that my projector light is off at around 5.5 seconds, which is just before the projector starts moving, and input 2.5 for the brightness, which automatically creates a new keyframe. Like before, I have to edit the keyframes, otherwise the light will gradually get brighter from 0 to 6 seconds, whereas I want my light off for 6 seconds to fully on. You can see when I drag the time bar down, the brightness slowly reduces towards 0. To fix this, I can select my keyframes again and edit the transitions. For this one, I need the transition to hold coming in, and for the first keyframe, I need this transition to hold going out. Now my brightness will remain at 0 until the 6 second mark. The brightness isn't the only thing I can animate. Light colours can also change. With my projector being water and nature themed, I will change this bright light to a bold blue. Dragging my time bar to around 9 seconds, I can change the colour again, this time to a lighter shade of blue, creating a new keyframe. Then moving to 13 seconds, I can change the colour to green, creating a third keyframe. The next change is at 17 seconds, changing the colour to a brighter green. Moving through the colours in this way makes the colour changes smoother, rather than going from, say, a red to green, which would create shades of brown in between. Instead, it's just a natural colour progression. Finally, moving to the end of the animation, I can change the colour to yellow. Because I have my transitions between each keyframe as smooth, the light change is subtle and gradual. You can see as I hover back through, ignoring the slow render passes, the light colour is changing throughout the animation. Thinking of my final animation, I want the environment brightness to go from light to dark, as if I have turned the light off in the bedroom, to allow the projector to really shine and make the projector images bolder against the other objects in the room. To do this, I need to add a keyframe to my environment at seconds at a brightness of 5. Then I want the light to switch off at around 5 seconds. Under the environment's general options, I can edit the brightness to 0.75. I don't want it pitch black, as I want to still be able to see some of the model details. Again, like before, I want the light changes to be sudden rather than gradual, so I have to edit the transitions for both keyframes. The last step is the camera animation. This is where I'll position my camera at different angles to create a moving view of my project. To do this, I always duplicate my first camera viewport. This is useful to use as another way of viewing your project without altering your current camera animation, as you can end up creating and overwriting new keyframes. Now I can add a keyframe to my viewport at 0 seconds. This will be the starting point of my animation. At this point, I can change the view of my projector. Zooming in closer, this will automatically overwrite my current keyframe. Ignoring this little video jump, I managed to crash Visualize. So moving on at 3 seconds, I'm going to slowly pull away from the turtle, but not too far. When animating, you have to think about the camera's position and how long you're going to give the camera to get there. It is trial and error, but you'll soon get the hang of it and you'll be able to achieve your desired camera effects. I try to avoid adding too many camera movements just to keep it smooth and simple between transitions. Moving my time bar to 9 seconds, I can reposition the camera further out, seeing more and more of the projected lights. As I tweak the positions, the keyframe will be created automatically and will overwrite as I make each movement. I really enjoy this part of my animations because this is where you can really show off all the work you've put into a design. At 19 seconds, I'm going to pull back in and have the camera facing further up to the ceiling to capture even more light projection, while still trying to keep a nice overview of the room. This just adds to a more interesting rendering. My final keyframe is at the end of the animation. I apply this with the K keyboard shortcut as I want my camera to hold at this position until the end of the tutorial. But I also want the camera to come to a slow stop. To do this, I can edit the keyframe properties to hold for the transition in. Now I'm ready to render. Going to the Tools tab and Render, I ensure my render type is on animation. Create Movie must also be ticked. This combines all the individual renderings into an MP4 file. I like to change the number of frames per second to 45. This creates a smoother video. At 45 frames per second, this gives me 922 renders for the video. The next change I like to make is under Render Options. Here I could change the render size and resolution, but more importantly I can control my render quality. For a design as detailed as this, which includes lighting, I wanted to use a high quality render, with my passes per frame increased to 200. This made a huge difference to the final quality of my renderings. I also had Enable Denoiser checked, which kept my renderings sharp but also helps to speed up rendering times. I could then render my project. Here is the finished animation again. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for watching.